Season 7, Episode 11, Command and Control to Customer Service Beyond Hazard Salad in Psychosocial Risk Management. This episode is about Central Office Command and Control. The team, Trajce, Alan and Sara, use this opportunity to debate the varied hazard salad included in the risk management guidance material. Trajce explores ideas around intrusive surveillance, requiring specific risk management strategies, and Sara reveals her anthem song, Little Miss, Can't Be Wrong, by the Spin Doctors, much to Alan's amusement. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the WOWORK podcast, a series of playful legal dissections on the most curious and alarming events in the world of work. The podcasters Alan Girl, Trajce Svetkovsky and Sara Pizzell debate how to craft a better experience of work. Sit back, relax and enjoy. And remember, none of the things we talk about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work.
Right. Talked about lots of cases where these types of situations occur, and you were telling me before, just in the break, that the Commonwealth has come out with a new code of practice.
Absolutely, yes.
Do you think it's going to help?
I don't really know, but I'm very fascinated by the latest addition to our landscape. By that I mean one state will do one thing, a territory do another. The latest addition in the harmonised work health and safety scheme is the work health and safety managing psychosocial hazards at Code of Practice for the Commonwealth. So at the federal level, for all those Comcare protected workers.
Have they done a good job of it? Because, you know, we have talked about ISO standards and codes of practice being so generic, and I was pleased to see some of the changes in the regulations in Queensland, where there's far more specificity about causational pathways, right? And that's something I've done research on and have written a book chapter in the manuscript of our Good Work Design book.
In the code, in the Psychosocial Code in Queensland?
Yeah, for the Work Health Safety Regulations, the update, is it Section 22? And you've talked about this, Part 55?
Yeah, Sections 55, and that's not a joke. Yes, 1st of April 2022 was when the regulation was
regulations
amended.
Updated. Yeah,
so that's just a paragraph.
I know, but it's one of the few paragraphs that it's really important because it talks about context. So you have a little bit of this in the Queensland Codes of Practice, not a lot of it in some of the other codes of practice. I've dissected these. If you look at the ISO standards and state codes of practice around Australia, there are 20 unique, distinct psychosocial hazards. And from those, aspects like distributed workforce management and workload management account for about 14 of those, right? 6 of those are related to things like exposure to incivility and occupational violence, like really more extreme things. But a lot of them are just, you know, the ways that we work and the subtleties, too, that can cause this harm. And I always talk about, well, hang on, which one? How do we pick all of these hazards to work out the intersection and the contributing risk factors? And do they cause acute or cumulative, immediate or longer-term harm with their exposures, and who's vulnerable in the workplace? So your regulations now do a better job of this, and they talk about causational pathways. So I've talked to you about the design advisory councils that we're providing support on, and we specifically provide support on a workplace that's integrating new technologies, a workplace that's changing workspace, a workplace that may have work system changes and job redesign, or the prevention, mitigation, management, intervention, investigation of a safety event. And those are the 4 main causational pathways that are finally recognized, right? And it says you have to look at intersecting risk factors, look at the acute and cumulative. But a lot of the codes of practice in the original ISO don't really spell that out and make sense of that for people. So this paragraph is really important.
Yeah, but just to clarify to our readers, it's the actual code, it's the Queensland's code with all of those terms and words that you're using, not the regulation itself. That's just a paragraph.
The regulation is really, the paragraph in the regulation.
Just that line. Look, if we bring up, but certainly the code
I'll
talks
pull it
about
up for you.
pathways.
I'll pull it up for you. I'll find it exactly.
Trajce, the new Commonwealth Code.
Yeah, the Commonwealth Code.
Does it get into the nuts and bolts? Like, does it talk about CCTV cameras?
Indeed. So whilst it lists all the others, like the fatigue, low job control, job insecurity, poor support, etc., lack of role clarity, this one I haven't seen in the other codes. Intrusive surveillance. This one's really out of the box. Excessive surveillance methods, tools to monitor and collect information about workers at work. Now, remember, workers at work means what? Work from anywhere, anytime, any place.
Good point.
So, and they give examples, which I thought were quite helpful, because what does that mean? Well, this is what it means. Examples includes unreasonable level of supervision, tracking of when and how much a worker is working, tracking calls made and movements made by the workers, using CCTV and trackable devices, the use of keyboard activity. There's been a lot of literature at the moment about particularly corporations monitoring just how much work you're doing. And some people have been dismissed.
So is the code saying this is inappropriate behaviour?
Yes. I'm quoting. All of this is straight verbatim. Technology that allows...
I say verbatim.
Because you're American. PCBU, to remote access and take screenshots of workers. So these cases recently, workers have been dismissed because, according to the bot, it detected that you hadn't done X amount of keystrokes and blah, blah to justify your hourly wage and so on and so forth. So that's time in motion kind of study stuff. That's real Mayo Institute kind of stuff. That's Henry Ford.
And what are they saying about the time in motion studies?
So GPS monitoring, movement in company vehicles.
And what are they saying about it? That you cannot?
Yeah, it's saying this is an example of intrusive. So it's saying this is not good work practice.
So
wait.
Some,
as opposed to other
some
reasons.
things are intrusive to protect people.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the key word is here, intrusive surveillance, excessive. So the definition, so what you asked before, are these codes helpful? Yes and no, because ultimately when they do get tested in court, definitionally, the issues such as what is the definition of excessive
and what is intrusive? Because there's software like
correct.
There's software like Viva Insights, not Viva, my company, but another software, Viva Insights, Microsoft, that will examine everybody's schedules and tease out what type of meetings you're having and get trend analysis. And companies are making decisions on this for workload management.
Yep. So that could be argued for or against. So just that mere statement, depending on what the definition of excessive or intrusive means, could be used as a shield.
You could weaponize it. You could weaponize it.
Sword or a shield. Remember that from equity?
All right,
sword or a shield.
Division 11. So this is it's the 22 amendment that was released for
in April.
1st of April 2023.
Read it out.
Accessed now today on 2024, okay?
Yeah.
And it is the amendment, Division 11, Psychosocial Risks, 55A, right? Meaning of a psychosocial hazards arises from or relates to the design or management of work.
Perfect.
Thank you.
There you go.
B, part 1. Part 2, a work environment. 3, plant at a workplace, which I will interpret as just technology generally, the trend, right?
Yeah.
And 4, workplace interactions or behaviors. So I think of the safety management approaches, the issues. So the system of work, the environment, the technology, or plant, it says, and workplace interactions, behaviors, right? All of these social relations. This is exactly what I've been talking about for so long about causational pathways, and that we do specific design advisory for. And those are the pathways. And so too many organizations are just looking at random hazards and not anchoring them to these causational pathways and specific tasks and activities that occur through that.
And that's the regulation.
That's the regulation. Good. So I'm so pleased to see this. And then it goes on to talk about, to determine risk. And it says, how are these psychosocial hazards interacting or combining? Ta-da! That's what I've been arguing too, right? And it gives, again, the design of work, your job demands, your tasks, your systems of work. So hallelujah. If you don't have a human factors ergonomics kind of professional with work design strategy background in your workplace, here is the update in the regulations pretty much arguing the need for work design strategy.
That's what you want. I know the person who drafted that, but I'm not going to mention that person's name.
But I can tell you it has matured.
Come on, call them out. Call them out by their first name.
I mean, I'd like to give them stars, but they may feel shy or coy about this.
Why?
Well, yeah, I've got to get permission.
She would be pleased.
How do you know
if
it's
you said her
she?
name.
How are we using pronouns at this point in time? We've just devoted a whole episode.
Because I know who it is.
Use of pronouns.
She's done a great job.
Yes. The fact that you have seized on the regulation and not the code or a standard is sensational.
Would you not expect that I have that capability, Trajce?
No,
Trajce, what are you saying?
Yeah, be careful.
I'm shocked too.
It's rarely that the regulation or the act, everybody seems to go straight to the code or straight to a standard.
I think
this arena, in the psychosocial arena.
Some of those have been watered down, diluted by how much volume and complexity. So the fact that this is just a few paragraphs and gets straight to the point, that's really helpful.
And I wonder if the other states have the same. I haven't done a cross-sectional analysis of the other regs, like whether the model, like how has it deviated from. So in other words, how different is Queensland's to ACTs, to WAs, and so on? I bet you they'll all be different. They wouldn't have the same regulation.
However, when you get into the minutiae of trying to write these guidelines and specifically call out technologies as opposed to the way that thinking has been applied in the business, like this new Commonwealth content, that gets really dangerous, treacherous waters.
Yeah, well, it's interesting.
I think I have alarm bells here because like that example I had with teaching and the teacher who was wrongfully asked to step aside during the investigation in as much as the optics that it caused and the harm for her return to work, right? In that instance, surveillance would have helped that person because they could have shown exactly the interaction with the student and anybody else nearby. So sometimes surveillance, if you're doing the right thing, is your defense.
As a defence lawyer, I like all the various different types of surveillance because it just means you're not arguing about stuff.
Yeah,
evidence. It's just getting down to what actually happened, and you're right. Often that works to the person accused to their
advantage.
benefit.
Yeah.
See, it boils down to reasonableness and the use. The other thing I like about this code is just above it is the traumatic events or material. Now, all the other codes talk about, frontline workers being exposed to traumatic events, but they put a little bit more particularity around this one. Experiencing fear of or extreme risks to the health or safety of themselves or others, exposure to natural disasters or seriously injured or deceased persons, frontline, emergency people, reading, hearing or seeing accounts of traumatic events, abuse or neglect that are coming out of the Kozorov's case.
We talked about this with Kozorov, right? Vicarious trauma.
And so here are the examples. What I like about they sort of seem to neatly just put. I mean, look, the other codes do it too, but I note this particular code seems to have a little bit more robust, a bit more scaffolding around the examples. So, witnessing or investigating fatalities, serious injuries, abuse, neglect, or serious incidents, e.g., investigating child protection cases. I mean, getting back to Kozorov's decision.
Maybe they were listening to our podcast, Trajce, because equally with all of these extra regulations update, I've been a vocal critic of it being too broad and too loose. Maybe they're listening to us and they're making these changes.
To do some
right?
workshops at reasonable rates. We're here. We're exposed to extreme effects or natural disasters or seriously injured people. Now, seriously injured people could involve, for example, work health and safety investigators. It could involve anyone. So the fact is this very wide. Look, the others talk about traumatic events exposure, but this particular code that the Commonwealth has, it just
I guess the reality is if we're not going to get better at managing these work-related stresses if we don't start talking about what the consequences of them are. So anyone who's in emergency services, police, firefighters, ambulance, the people in child protection, people who work in residential care, nurses, doctors, we're just not going to get better at managing them.
And if you're a workplace that has a two-pronged approach versus three-pronged, meaning you've just got health and safety advisories and management and workforce strategy, two-pronged versus the third prong in this, the third wheel of design, you're unlikely to have a really robust, resilient, future-proofed type of method to manage work well.
Yes.
So workplaces do not have that design lever They do not employ design strategy. They don't have a service design perspective. In most workplaces, that is missing. There's not a head of design, and there's certainly, and that's why we've got these design advisory councils now, at least a way to integrate that in your existing legacy systems, because businesses, I go in and out of consulting businesses all the time, and they don't have a design application, methods, tools, strategies, practice.
It's actually frightening because all the info is here. In fact, I'd urge listeners to perhaps look at this latest incarnation for across the board.
Do you know who wrote this code?
No, but I'll find out. But the definition of harassment, including sexual harassment, I won't read it all, but I like this paragraph. Workplace technology facilitated sexual harassment can happen by phone, email, camera, or online. See, I'd write something like this, such as through social media. That's what happens when you provide really good particulars. Or by misusing shared workplace technology, such as shared calendar. It pretty much has ticked off every digital.
How about the avatar you choose to represent your persona?
I would have thrown in emoji. Thank
emoji
you.
And avatar. Emoji, GIF, and avatar symbols.
See, this is what a good workplace design think tank can do for clients.
Look,
but one more. But the examples. Telling insulting jokes about particular racial groups. All right, that one's been around. But making derogatory comments, taunts about someone's disability, asking intrusive. It goes on and on. Jokes, suggestive, leering, innuendo. I don't think I've seen a more robust example. And so each of the paragraphs lists quite good examples, which to me are signposts. For a
advisory councils, design advisory council, yahoo!
Yeah, just like a designer friend, phone a design friend.
That's it.
Say they would
phone Sara.
Phone Sara.
Phone Sara.
So in addition to all Sarah's know-how, but Sara would have read every single code. She would have synthesised all these codes and say, "Look, I'm not telling you anything new. This is what's expected of you. Let's use this."
Is there anything Sara doesn't know?
No, I'm not aware of anything.
Well, it's not about...
She's like the vault of information.
Except songs. She's a
songs. She's so great on songs.
On the songs.
I told you that when I was a kid, my brother used to sing that song, Little Miss Can't Be Wrong.
That's right. Yeah, so she does have an Achilles heel. It's music.
So,
yes.
So, sorry.
Go on.
Recently, I've been talking to businesses about changing their whole optics, their whole strategy, their whole view on how they consider themselves from a central office perspective. And this relates to all of this, okay? Because too often I see central office strategies operating more like command and control. Like, here we have change, that's our business purpose, and you will do it this way, and here's a new policy, we expect you all to implement it. It's like the minute you're using command and control strategies, it's almost like you're assuming you've got people there by conscription, which only happens in times of war, right? Where you can retain these folks and mandate this. But when you change this and use service design thinking, you start to think of yourself in central office as a customer service center, right? Dart Lindsay, who's contributing to our book on good work design, wrote a paper for Harvard Business Review recently on work as a product. And you've got to sell that internally and externally. So if you are centrally thinking about yourself as a central office, as customer service, suddenly all these mandates for just policies and procedures shift, and you start to go, hang on, what do our business units and our operations need to thrive, to do well, and to function? How do I do this in a way that I'm not causing a fettered process and complicating the process? How do I actually give the tools, resources, and support that they can use to get the job done? How do we do this? And that instantly makes you think about, hang on, a design strategy. The personas, the empathy, the needs, the pain points, the gain points that need to be supported. How many times I can't tell you when something happens, that is not to the expectation of central office, and they go, I know, we need to write a new policy. I was like, what? You think that's going to fall like a lead balloon on people who are already overworked and overtired? Are you serious? Yeah. Are you serious?
Seems to be the default.
And that tempts the default procedure.
Yeah, default, not a new policy.
This calling out and in these regulations, using this language is very powerful to say work design strategy. Right? I'm going to make it real plain. reset your thinking on being a central office as command and control
Yep.
to customer service.
Because the one-size-fits-all policy is not going to fit all. If you're at the front line, if you're behind the desk, back office, front office, it's going to be very different. So it's got to be bespoke and tailored. But look no further than what's in the code, and then you use those elements to design a specific outcome. I'm just quite
Little
surprised.
Miss can't be wrong.
No.
And I don't know why, but when I look at, what song's coming to mind from Miss Who Doesn't Know Any Songs? Puff the Magic Dragon.
Gee whiz. Am I the dragon or that guy? Who was
I
that
think it's
guy?
because we were talking
What was
about...
that song about?
Yes.
That's it. It's because we were talking about psychedelic drugs earlier.
Yes, it was a lot of stuff happening
And
in the
Mary
60s.
J.
I don't know. I'm not from the 60s, so I don't know. All right.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Why Work. You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan. And if you'd like to know more about some of the things we've talked about today, please subscribe, and we'd be more than happy to provide you with information, names of cases, and other things that may interest you. Please be aware that none of the matters we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work. See you next time.